Alright, we're gonna do another one of these for Star Trek 3.
Don't grieve, Admiral.
Previously on Star Trek.
Yeah, this is, yeah, I mean, context is important for this film. If you watch this film without watching The Wrath of Khan, which I imagine some people would have, yeah, it doesn't make sense. You might be thinking, oh, who would possibly watch this film without seeing the previous one? I don't know, parents taking their kids, maybe, or just, casual moviegoers who are just kind of seeing what's on. It did happen, surprisingly, so yeah, this needs to happen, basically, but I don't understand what the sin is other than just stating the fact that this has like a little flashback.
I have been, and always shall be.
This is a great scene in Star Trek II, but Spock did not do the live long and prosper sign until actually saying live long and prosper.
That's a genuine sin. Genuinely, he's correct here. He's 100% correct, so well done. I mean, for sin number 2, very good going.
Also, the first 2 minutes of this movie are literally footage from the previous movie. Jesus.
You already sinned the fact that there's a flashback thing going on. I don't know why you're sinning it again, but alright, you do you.
Space. The final frontier.
Whisper narration, more than...
Yeah, that is in the film. Sorry, it's really weird, but if it's not a genuine criticism and it's not a joke and it's like just an observation, to my knowledge, that's not what CinemaSins should be doing by their own description. So, yeah, what are they doing is the ultimate question with these sins where they just state things that happen.
2 minutes of cloud and space credits that do nothing for nobody.
Yeah, he sins credits again. I don't need to make the same joke I've already made about his same joke that he always makes. But I do need to acknowledge that this happens and that it's generally quite a poor thing to do. Just a running joke implies that it was funny the first time and it gets funnier the more you tell it. That's why a running joke is more difficult to do than just a normal joke, because it needs to keep being funny and it needs to keep getting funnier. Just repeating the same joke over and over again does not make it a running gag, it just makes it something you keep saying.
If the movie is directed by Spock, then that takes all the fun out of trying to find Spock.
Not really, I don't... If it's directed by... Like, what's the joke here, right? Is the joke here that we know Spock is behind the camera in all of these shots? Or do we... Is the joke here that we see Spock in the opening title crawl, in the opening... Not title crawl, in the opening credits. So, we've already found him. Is like, give me a joke. Give me an actual solid joke with a punchline, not just kind of some vague, oh, well, this takes all the fun out of finding Spock. It's like, well, what specifically are you referring to here? Anyway.
The death of Spock is like an open wound.
It was a dark and stormy night.
There's actually quite a bit of dialogue before this as well that builds up. So it's not like he just starts talking like this. But also, I don't think it's particularly egregious, to be honest. But yeah, all right. I'm going to dispute that, but I'll also say that if you want to believe that's a valid sin, I will respect your decision. So I'm not going to say objectively you're wrong, but I am going to say subjectively I disagree.
The timing is excellent, Mr. Scott. You fix the barn door after the horses come home.
Well, that's a dick-headed thing to say, especially over the all-ship radio. You think Scotty doesn't know this already, ass?
Okay. Couple of things. The all-ship radio... Do you think this conversation is being broadcasted to all the hallways in the ship, every deck, every corridor? No. Kirk is speaking to Scotty. And secondly, this isn't a dickhead thing to say. This is just a remark. Like, this is Kirk, because like Kirk is also equally to blame for the events of the film that happened. So, like, Kirk isn't being a dickhead to Scotty. He's just kind of a bit worn out and tired and feeling the loss of crew. Not just crew that have been transferred, but crew that are just dead. So yeah, like, this isn't a dickhead thing for Kirk to say to Scotty.
8 weeks, sir. But you don't have 8 weeks, so I'll do it for you in 2.
Well, that was easy.
That's part of Scotty's charm. I'm not sure why that's a sin, to be honest. That's one of the better, more quotable parts of the film. And actually, Mr. Scott being a miracle worker is also a very quotable part of Star Trek as a franchise.
Hey everybody, it's Christopher Lloyd, from Taxi. The
This actor was in another film or TV show that allows to reference it. Just why? How is that a sin? I don't get it. Because it's not a joke, really. Because the punchline is this actor was in another film, and that's not really a punchline. Is the punchline that we said he's in another film that was not Back to the Future, his most famous film? Is that the punchline? I don't know.
Klingons keep RUSs as pets, proving once and for all that The Princess Bride and Star Trek take place in a shared universe.
No, they don't. ROUSs, they look like giant rats. This looks a bit more like a reptile, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it's not the same at all.
This is basically a space 8-track, which only makes sense if the movie is made in an era where 8-tracks are still a thing, which it was, so still sending the 8-trackness of it all.
I like this one, right? I genuinely. So Jeremy right here is saying, okay, this prop here is basically a space 8-track, right? It's a sci-fi tape. It only makes sense if the film is set in an era where 8-tracks are still a thing, which it is. He acknowledges that this is a artifact of the film basically being retro, right? He acknowledges that. Um, and he says, actually, this makes sense, but I'm still sinning it. And I respect that. I respect that he kind of outlines this because in Trek culture, in that previous video, I kind of went over the fact that they point out some of these flaws, but they don't outline the fact that this is because it's a retro film. This is an artifact of being a film from the 80s. Jeremy does point this out, so credit where it's due. Jeremy is better than Trek culture in at least one regard right now.
Still sending the 8-trackness of it all. This whole ship appears to explode, but the people here get to chill like nothing's happened for a split second before the
before the explosion reaches them. So we see here there are actually chunks of the ship that survive. So even though the explosion encompasses the entire ship, it's not a Death Star explosion where the entire ship is entirely atomized and vaporized. That's not what happens. So the fact that there are several explosions in the compartment before we cut to the exterior shot is fine. If anything, it's consistent in the Star Trek universe as well.
explosion reaches them. In HD, you can totally see the slightly lighter background box behind the Enterprise as it passes over this planet. Never noticed that until I intentionally nitpicked this movie for YouTube, which suggests it's still probably pretty good effects for its time. Still sending it because I have a sin counter to pad.
I like this. Firstly, this isn't padding your sin counter. This might be a very minor issue, but I do like the little self-deprecating joke of, well, actually, this kind of suggests that actually this is aged quite well and this special effect is decent, but I still need to add sins for this video. I like that self-deprecating joke, right? Because it demonstrates self-awareness. I like this sin because it really shows that he's paying attention. Like, if you look really closely, you can subtly see the little outline that moves with the ship. So I like this, right? He acknowledges that the effects are actually pretty decent, that this is a very minor thing, and he only noticed it when he's nitpicking. He acknowledges that he is nitpicking and that actually, the effects, if I'm having to look this hard, the effects are still decent. And then he also makes a self-deprecating, but also self-aware joke that the fact that this is a sins video and he still needs to add sins, even though visually this does look perfectly fine. Just start to end, even though this is one of the longer sins he takes to get through, this is really good. I love this, right? If Cinema Sins was just more of this, it would be perfect, right? So, like, as a sin, the first 1 minute 30 here, we've had some stumbles, right? We've had some mistakes, but we've also had a few really, really, really good points and really, really, really good sins. So I'm actually quite impressed right now.
Space porn that could double as a sex ed video. Hey!
Okay, I take that all back. Really? Really, really, really. Okay, Jeremy. Okay. Hang on. Where is it? Yeah, there we go.
Hey, it's Excelsior!
Nope, I had the frame right there. There we go. Space porn that could double as a sex ed video. How? This is just the Enterprise going into space dock. How? What? The only sexual thing I can think of is space dock is a vagina and the Enterprise is a penis. That's the only thing I can think of. To which I would probably say, well, due to the size discrepancy, I would just say I'm really sorry, Jeremy, and I'm also really sorry, Jeremy's wife. That's it. That's all I have to say. You make a sex joke, I'm gonna make fun of, I don't know, you, Jeremy, and or the size of your penis. That's seemingly the only response I have to these jokes.
Sex ed video. Hey, it's Excelsior! Sulu's future ship from undiscovered country. Neat!
My friends,
He doesn't sin that. There's no ding, and the sin counter didn't go up. He didn't actually. He didn't actually sin
Ship from
this.
undiscovered country. Neat!
my friends,
He doesn't sin it. That's so weird. So I like here's the thing. So he doesn't need to increase the sin counter to point out neat things in the film. Um, like if anything, you just have like a separate trivia counter here as well. I'll be honest with you, and that would people would still watch it all the same. It's not like people only watch it because they only want to see mistakes. If people are interested in the sins and the goofs, probably are. Chances are they've probably read IMDb trivia as well. But yeah, this I'm surprised he didn't mention the lighting or the kind of the border around the ship being a bit weird. Because that I feel like is a genuine visual sin. But whatever. I'll gloss over that. But I'm just really happy. If this was a mistake, I'm a bit sad. But I'm really happy that he just points out a little fact about the film, and he doesn't sin it. Right? He doesn't say, "Ah, yes, this is a sin. This is clearly a mistake in the film that the film progresses." The franchise progresses. So I like this.
Ship from undiscovered country. Neat!
my friends, the great experiment.
That experiment works, and it saves your ass 3 movies from now, but scoff all you want, old timer.
Couple of things. So firstly, the great experiment is the transwarp drive within the ship, not the Excelsior itself. So that's why it has the NX designation, and that's why later in the film we see it with the NCC designation. Secondly, he doesn't actually include any clip of Kirk or Scotty scoffing, so yeah, he makes reference to something that he doesn't actually show, which is a bit weird.
Aye. And if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a wagon.
But
But wouldn't she, though? No. The whole point of this phrase is, like, just to say, in a very reductive way, well, yeah, if that makes sense, then this makes sense, So if that's true, then this is true, right? And it's just trying to say in a very sarky way, yeah, that's not true, right? Like in that what was that morning breakfast show where it's like, yes, well, I think I can't remember her name, but she says, "Oh, this is actually a bit like a British dish," and this very Spanish individual who's cooking this Spanish dish was like, "Well, yeah, well, if my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike." And that's what he was saying there, and that's why it was so funny because it just came out of left field. But saying "but wouldn't she though" doesn't make sense as an addition to that or as a counter. Like either way, if you see him as agreeing or disagreeing, that sentence itself doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense. And sorry, when I say that sentence, I mean Jeremy's response is what I'm referring to.
wouldn't she, though? Yeah, better go check that alone. You're only the captain of this ship. Those 2 officers didn't sign up for this.
Okay, I get he's making this in a bit of a jokey way, but my interpretation is these 2 armed guards don't join Kirk inside Spock's quarters. And that is a bit weird, because Kirk doesn't give them any orders to stay outside. Usually, that's what happens. Kirk just says, "wait here," and then he goes in. He doesn't give those orders, so that is the sin here, basically. But, well, if that is the sin here, and that is how I've interpreted it, yeah, makes sense, but if he's just saying, Well, yeah, no, it kind of makes sense, right? I think the phrasing is a bit awkward, but I think that's what Jeremy's guessing at. So, fair dues, this is a valid one.
Sign up for this?
Enterprise is 20 years old.
Jesus, they let that thing fly around for 20 years, and the crew is complaining about retiring it? I mean, I'm on the side of Starfleet here.
You can be on the side of Starfleet here. I don't think Starfleet is being portrayed as wrong or illogical or incorrect, right? The argument here is just feasibility of repairing such an old ship, and their Starfleet are thinking, well, actually, we could repair the ship, get it back up into running order, or we could just, not do that, right? I mean, there are bigger and better starships to manufacture, so yeah, kind of, it makes sense for the Starfleet point of view. You can extrapolate exactly where they're coming from, but then you can also understand that Kirk and crew have sentimental attachment to the Enterprise, and also it means that, well, they're not able to get back on a ship and get back out there and carry on doing what they're doing. You know, they're kind of left in this nebulous kind of status. So both sides have a point. It's not like the film is pointing the Admiral as wrong here. So the fact that you agree with the Admiral doesn't mean this is a sin against the film. It just means that you don't necessarily agree with Kirk's character motivation for repairing the Enterprise, as opposed to, the Admiral's motivation for not repairing it, or Starfleet's motivation for not repairing it. Again, this isn't a sin with the film itself.
In your absence, Genesis has become a galactic controversy.
You are all under orders not to discuss with anyone your knowledge of Genesis.
This is something we could have told you long before you got back, but it feels better doing it now, after you could have violated the policy already.
Theoretical.
Right. Couple of things. So one, the dude says, in your absence, Genesis has become a politically charged topic or something like that, right? Again, the time between them wrapping up Star Trek 2 and them arriving here at the starbase, I'm not sure how much time has passed, but I don't think it's such a tremendous amount of time where this has been a known issue for several days or months or whatever, right? So already the time frame is way too short, but I would also say the Genesis project was already classified before their mission began. This Admiral is reiterating that this is classified and you're not to discuss this with anyone because it's a politically charged topic as well. So there's extra emphasis, but this is already a classified project. Just because it's common knowledge that Genesis now exists does not mean you're free to openly talk about it. That's what the Admiral's getting at here. But yeah, he's saying, they had however long to violate the policy already. Again, they were still operating on the assumption that not everyone knew about Genesis, and it's still a classified project.
Violated the policy already.
Theoretical data on the Genesis device.
I get that the chick in that earlier scene stole and gave them this. My question is, when did Kirk find the time to record himself speaking authoritatively on Genesis since the last movie? The only answer is the flight home to Earth. But then I counter with, why isn't Dr. Marcus making this video? Who's this video even made for?
Okay. I'm gonna counter this, right? Well, I'm gonna counter part of this. So firstly, let's kind of rewind here. So the only answer is the flight home to Earth. I disagree. So we can see here a lot of these consoles behind him. He's recording this on the bridge, right? But then it's weird, but you can see these bridge consoles, they look in pristine condition, right? No scorch marks, nothing smashed, it looks absolutely fine, perfect. So I would say, in my personal opinion, this is somewhere between Kirk knowing that, Kirk receiving the distress message from Carol Marcus, and then Kirk getting ambushed by Khan, right? I'd say it's between those two events in that film. But I would also say that Jeremy has a point here. Starfleet already has all the Genesis, pitch meetings, right? They have the proposal to Starfleet. So Kirk retreading the exact same stuff Doesn't make sense. He doesn't even emphasize the destructive power of the Genesis project. He just treads the exact same points as Carol Marcus. It's a bit weird why Kirk decides actually he's going to deliver the exposition instead of Carol Marcus. But yeah, the question of who is this video even made for? Yeah, genuine question.
It's the flight home to Earth. But then I counter with, why isn't Dr. Marcus making this video? Who's this video even made for? Why make a video of information you are going to personally deliver in hours when you get back to Earth? Wouldn't they already have the Carol Marcus explainer video about it from the
Yeah, so he goes over that same point that I made, that they already have the Carol Marcus video. Genuine sin. But here's the thing, right? Jeremy says that he's personally going to deliver to Earth when he gets back, right? That's not correct, because otherwise how does it end up in the hands of the Klingons? So it must have been delivered by transmission somehow, and that transmission must have been intercepted, or some spies at Starfleet somehow managed to get their hands on this, but that seems less likely given the available material Kruge here has. He's not an admiral. He's not a spy master. You know, he's not really like that. So look. The bottom line is this is a valid one, and actually there are multiple sins in this one particular plot point. But it's a bit weird that he kind of makes a few. Well, I say it's a bit weird. He does make a few minor errors here and there. He kind of misunderstands the fundamental parts of some of it, but fair enough. You know, he does still get at a valid point, and he could actually add quite a few sins for this, but he only has one, which is a bit weird.
Rathacon? I guess my point is, this is one of the most expositional use-only videos to ever appear in a movie.
Instead of a dead moon, a living, breathing planet now exists.
With no warmth or energy from a nearby sun. We also generate 10 Dumbledores in order to sustain life on the planet.
Yeah, this is something that Jeremy mentioned in the last film. He's assumed that Genesis works without a sun, and there is absolutely no basis for this assumption whatsoever. I can't find where he's getting this information from, so I can only assume he's just fabricated it because no one directly told him something so remarkably common sense that he's assumed that it's not true, when in reality it is.
Generate 10 Dumbledores in order to sustain life on the planet.
This is where the fun begins, Savick.
That is not Savick. Couldn't you have at least picked an actress that even kind of resembles Kirstie Alley?
Okay, Kirsty? I thought it was Kirsty. I understand there's an I, but it's not Kirsty. And secondly, I will agree that the change in actress for Savick was kind of not great. Not necessarily because I prefer one actress over the other, but more because I feel like Robin Curtis is playing a different character. Savick is half Vulcan, half Romulan, but also she, like, a big point of Star Trek 2 is she's not a cadet, but she's a trainee. She is a lieutenant, but a lot of her personality traits just aren't present here. Savick just feels like your kind of bog standard Vulcan, which, you know, don't get me wrong, she does some stuff in the film and she does have a personality. It's just not the personality that's been established in Star Trek 2, and I do feel like the film does slightly suffer for it. But in terms of switching the actresses around, I feel like that's less of a egregious thing as opposed to just having what feels like a very different character overall.
Sector 2 indicating desert terrain. Minimal vegetation.
But why? The Genesis project creates life out of nothing. How would that include a desert with minimal vegetation?
Yeah, they also go over a bunch of other biomes as well. So my question to Jeremy is, if you're going to create a project if you're going to have Project Genesis, which creates life, why can't it create life in a variety of biomes? You know, why can't it create arid life? Why can't it create aquatic life? Why can't it create, jungle biomes, or temperate biomes, or mountainous biomes, frigid biomes? You know, why can't it create a variety? Why does it need to just create temperate continental biomes? Why can't it? Again, it's fine to ask the question, But if you're going to point that out as a sin, then you need to back it up. And without pointing out anything that contradicts this or suggests that this isn't correct, it is just a question. And now this just becomes your headcanon of, well, why doesn't it work this way? And the reality is the film doesn't need to explain a lot of things if they aren't problems. So if you're going to bring up a non-problem that's just a detail which you feel like you would like to know, and it's not explained in the film, well, it's not really a sin, I'm afraid.
Cross-referenced and verified. An unidentifiable life form reading.
Do you even hear yourself speaking that incongruous sentence? Verified, unidentifiable readings?
Yep. So there's a difference between I can't verify this right now because the scan is still in progress, and this cannot be verified, right? There is a big difference. So that's what she's clarifying there in that sentence. So you're kind of putting this very awkward laughter in here, but the reality is, no, this sentence does make sense if you think about it.
Why do we beam it up?
Yeah, sure, an unidentifiable life form. Why not? Luckily, the captain is hilariously and obviously by the book, so this idea is not entertaining.
Okay, so this captain is, by the book, but I don't know. I feel like David, he is one of the lead scientists on the Genesis project. He's interacted with the life forms created via Genesis for quite a lot of time. You know, he's been working on this project for a while, so it makes sense for David to be less cautious and more curious. It makes sense for this captain to be less curious and more cautious. This is not a fault of the film that these two are not in immediate agreement, and nor is it a fault with the film, or is it a character error if a character makes a genuine mistake or makes a decision that you don't personally agree with, right? So that's not a sin, that is just part of the film. You can peel this away. You're not revealing a sin, what you're revealing is another layer to the film.
Ahura has a ravioli ring. Well,
Okay. Sorry, I have a set of headphones where if I kind of move it to scratch my ear, it pauses. It's the Sony ones that are kind of weird, but they're also really good. But they're like stupidly expensive, so I wouldn't recommend them really. But here, yeah, she does have a ravioli ring. You're right, and that is an amusing thing to point out. Well done.
well, phew.
I also like how Kirk is somewhat. Yeah, I just like his expression there. Like he is also done with Jeremy's bullshit, you know?
Ravioli ring. Well, phew. That search for Spock didn't take long, and, well, Spock.
Okay, I saw that one coming for a long time. I'm very sorry, but that one, it wasn't a joke. It was more like you know what it was like? It was like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, right? I'm not going to shit on Brooklyn Nine-Nine as a TV show. It's quite a nice show, right? But as a comedy show, its style of comedy is not I'm laughing. Its style of comedy is not even I'm exhaling through my nose. Its style of comedy is just this warm, kind of fuzzy, non-offensive thing, and it just kind of happens. And you don't laugh through it, but you still kind of count it as comedy because there are jokes, you know? Again, I've got nothing against Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I enjoyed watching it, but I will not say that I was laughing at it as the same way that I would laugh at stand-up comedy, you know? But maybe that's just me. Anyway.
Spock trusted you, and you denied him his future.
Spock's dad, the audience, everyone in the universe except for Kirk seems to realize the Genesis planet would revive Spock.
Spock's dad doesn't know this. Spock's dad is talking about returning Spock's soul and body so that they can go through the funeral ceremony. He's not talking about recovering Spock's alive body and rejoining it with his soul. That's not what he's talking about right now. So I would say quite firmly that, no, you're wrong, Jeremy.
Mind melding just got a whole lot sexier. Oh, yeah.
He's so close, right? He's really, really close to a genuine point. So, look, the lighting This is the same scene, right? It goes from here to here, right? You see the difference in lighting. Nobody in the scene turns the lights off. They just walk to this side of the room, and now, they're only lit by the fireplace, and yeah. If he's just talking about the lighting, fair enough, but he doesn't mention the lighting at all. I will interpret that in a very generous way to mean that's what he's talking about, but I'll note that this is me going out a little bit here and making an assumption that maybe this is the benefit of the doubt. Sorry, maybe I'm giving Jeremy the benefit of the doubt here, but I would say that there is a point to be made there regarding the lighting.
Sarek is getting more free homemade porn right now with green aliens than I ever will, even after...
So during this mind meld, they're actually recounting the experience of Kirk watching Spock die, which is actually quite a heavy moment for Kirk definitely, but also this is quite a heavy moment for Sarek. And Mark Leonard, the chap who plays Sarek, I think he does a really good job of this because he's a Vulcan, but you can tell that this is something that is difficult for him as well, in his own Vulcan way, without overplaying it to the point where it becomes absurd and people start, creating videos to sin it. So I would say that this is quite a profound moment in the film where they kind of dig up this thing, and you see Sarek react to seeing his own son die and react to knowing that his son's essence was not transferred in any way, shape, or form, and he's gone forever. Making a weird sex joke, I feel like, is a bit weird, especially when the film specifically tells you exactly what life experiences are being stepped through right now. But you know what? Fair dues, whatever.
After seeing Bones literally say things Spock would say, after breaking into Spock's quarters, then hearing this shit about Vulcans mind melding with someone before they die, Kirk still doesn't make the connection that Spock's essence is inside Bones. Yes, he wonders aloud if Spock joined with someone else and goes to check the video, but he should know it's Bones instantly, no?
No. That's a very quick one. No. So what happens is they detect a life form in Spock's quarters. They go over there, take a look. It's, someone's there. They say something Spock related. As it turns out, it's Bones. And basically, when they dock and they're having their little party, I think it's when they're having their party. Basically, Kirk says, "Yeah, Bones isn't here." After the incident, Starfleet said it's stress related and he's being taken care of. The assumption there is he's got shore leave and he's been taken care of via therapy, right? So far, upon learning about all this stuff, Kirk says, "I wonder if he joined with anyone else," and then he checks through the footage. He shouldn't instantly know it's Bones, because that alone is not enough evidence to say, oh, well, Bones must be carrying the soul of Spock, right? He has, suspicion, sure, but you shouldn't instantly think... he shouldn't instantly know, and him going off to check the footage isn't a sin, It's like, we're watching this with hindsight of knowing what happens literally in the sequence of events as they happen in the previous film and in this film. So we see this mind meld happen. Kirk doesn't. So it's a bit weird how you're sinning the film for Kirk not knowing something that he doesn't actually know, and the only reason we do know is because we have additional context.
Man, it's insane how many angles the Enterprise was recording this from, right? It's almost cinematic.
Yeah, this is reused footage. If you want to sin that, fair enough. I won't actually stop you. Because, yeah, fair enough. This is meant to be security footage, and we're getting loads of angles and shots here that are not really what we would consider security footage stuff. Usually it's just top down from the corner of the room, and that's a static thing. So the fact that we're getting all these different shots is a bit weird.
Repeat and augment.
Augment? That's the Starfleet jargon version of the zoom and enhance cliche.
Kind of, yeah. Like, they don't zoom to an egregious degree, so I wouldn't exactly sin this as zoom and enhance. What I would say is it's a bit weird. He says augment, and the computer knows firstly that he wants to zoom, and secondly knows where he wants to zoom in on. I think that's a bit odd, but whatever. That's genuine sin there. But I can also see where Jeremy's coming from, I guess, and that is a vaguely amusing thing to bring up. Zoom and enhance. It's a bit of a meme, so fair enough, I guess, Jeremy.
Exercise caution, Lieutenant.
When this guy retires, he'll be decorated as the most careful captain Starfleet ever produced.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of his character. Sorry, it's genuinely, this is a moment where just something happens in the film, a little counter, dings up, and you're just like, okay, well, you're right, Jeremy, that was certainly a thing that happened in the film. Where was the sin, by the way? Just nowhere? Okay, cool.
There are your life forms. These were microbes on the tube surface.
Microbes, by their very definition, are microscopic living organisms. I hate to be nitpicky, but these seem way more visible without a microscope than usual.
You're not being nitpicky because you're actually wrong. David says these were microbes, not they are microbes. And then they go on to say about how these have evolved rapidly. So you're wrong, basically. Well done.
Also, unexplained alien space ravioli.
They are explained. They do look... In fact, they're not even space ravioli either, because they're microbes on the casing of the torpedo tube, which will have been there from the Enterprise. So it's not like it collected these microbes in space and then dropped into the planet, and these are space microbes. No, these are just normal microbes.
And the search for Spock has ended. And microbes got our hopes up.
Okay, that one was better, right? That one, as a joke, saying, oh, the search for Spock has ended. That was better than the Sarek one. I'll give him that.
And your life and your career stand for rationality, not for intellectual chaos.
The This asshole just described the opposite of what Jim Kirk's career has stood for.
Okay, do you think that Kirk's career has stood for the opposite of rationality? Do you think he just flies around the galaxy doing the most irrational things he can think of? Not really, no. He's I mean, if you compare Kirk to Picard, then yeah, Kirk is seen as less of an intellectual and more of a kind of more likely to kind of wing it, I guess. But the reality is, no, Kirk is a very rational and very intelligent individual. So you're kind of saying, oh no, Kirk, by implication, Kirk is not rational and he's not reasonable and he's not a very good tactician and strategist and diplomat, and he's got charm and charisma and very sound reasoning as well. And also the fact that he's a leader too. And by leader, I mean he lets people crack on with the stuff. So, like, leader in Star Trek Discovery means you can do everything, right? So, I mean, if you think about it, Burnham... I know I'm bringing Burnham up, but Burnham is good at everything, right? Can you name anything Burnham cannot do? Because she's good at engineering, she's good at science, she's good at piloting, she's good at tactical, she's good at hand-to-hand combat, she's good as a marksman, she's good at everything, right? There's nothing that... Even Saru, right, who I think is the scientist, was scanning something. It's like, oh, I'm having difficulty with this. Burnham, the first officer, kind of just like pushes him out, like a little shove out of the way, and just does it for him. And it's just really weird because one, she's insufferable as an individual, right? Insufferably smug. And then two, just she's good at absolutely everything. I don't want to say Mary Sue, but it really does give me Mary Sue vibes. Whereas Kirk, he has some abilities, but quite often he relies on his crew and their expertise. In fact, I'd say more often than not, he relies on his crew and their expertise to get him out of situations and to resolve situations, right? That's what I mean when I say Kirk is a leader. I don't mean he's good at doing everything. I mean that he's the man who can get the most out of his crew. So that's what I mean by, you know. Anyway, sorry. Basically, long story short, Kirk's career exemplary, and he demonstrates a lot of things. But something that he does not demonstrate is that he is irrational, or somehow not, not intelligent. Right?
No one will be seated during the Spock McCoy hybrid goes to the bar scene.
What does this mean? What genuinely? What does that mean? Hang on.
Opposite of what Jim Kirk's career has stood for. No one will be seated during the Spock McCoy hybrid goes to the bar.
What does he mean? No one will be seated? Because like Bones takes a seat. Is he referring to like this guy and this guy? They don't get seated? Is that what he's? Because presumably they go off screen to sit at some other table, or this guy just kind of stands here and vibes out. You know, I don't know what the sin is here.
Bar scene. This video game is clearly stupid. There, I said it.
I mean, this is another artifact of it being an older film. Is some of the special effects are going to look dated, but yeah, this video game is clearly stupid. There, I said it. I guess, kinda, maybe a bit. I mean, it definitely looks dated, but yeah, I don't know.
Stupid. There, I said it.
How soon is now?
Star Trek character inspires the most popular song the Smiths ever produced.
I'm guessing the Smiths produced a song in which some of the lyrics were "How soon is now." I don't know. I've not listened to the music, but that is the assumption. But well done. Someone said words that were also said by someone else. Valid sin for this film, apparently.
McCoy is basically Spock at this point, but only the secrets of the Vulcan nerve pinch didn't transfer for some reason. I guess the reason is comic relief, but still. No one...
No. I'm very sorry, but no. McCoy is like a awkward blend of McCoy and Spock, so he kind of switches between them and says things that are a bit of both throughout the entirety of the scene, and the writing is really well done, and the delivery is also really well done to emphasize that is what's happening. So McCoy is not basically Spock at this point, and the fact that the Vulcan nerve pinch doesn't work by extension is consistent with what we've seen thus far in the scene, unless you want to take this one scene out of context and then give the audience the incorrect context and then have a little counter in the top left just ding up. Unless you want to do that, then yeah.
The reason is comic relief, but still. No one pulls a punch better than William goddamn Shatner.
No one pulls a punch. Here's the thing, right?
But still. No one pulls a...
To be honest...
punch better than William goddamn Shatner.
Sorry, double clicked there.
But still. No one pulls a punch.
I think he's not exactly a million miles off his mark here. This doesn't look egregiously terrible. This looks fine. Am I the only one who thinks this punch looks...
transfer for some reason, I guess.
Absolutely fine. I think that looks alright. That looks convincing, at least. For the speed at which that happened, that looked alright.
Yes, let's put away that amazing super useful Destructoid gizmo and never use it again in the future history of our adventures.
Alright, here's a question for you. At what point in the future will they use that? It's a genuine question, right? So, yeah, you got the rest of this film. They board Krug's ship, but obviously if they, use that Destructo device on their bridge consoles, then, they won't be able to get out of there, so... and also there's only one person on the ship who beams them up, so... Yeah. Basically, I don't see a reason for them to use this in this film. Star Trek 4, Wales back in time, they don't board anyone. Star Trek 5, new ship. Cybok takes over the ship, so they get boarded, but they don't board anyone, and they don't really have any reason to explode any consoles, to my knowledge. Star Trek 6, 2 people board the Klingon ship, not to disable it, but to assassinate no, not Gowron. Gorkon, that's it. So again, they wouldn't need to use it, and uh, they Kirk and crew, they don't board a Klingon ship. I mean, they do, but to resuscitate Gorkon and to try and save him. But yeah, no, I don't know. After that, you start getting into Generations and TNG stuff. You've got Generations, where again, I don't think this would be terribly useful. First Contact, nope. Insurrection, not really. Nemesis, again, the only time they board the what do they call, the scimitar? That's it. In a setting where they're in combat is when the scimitar is basically entirely disabled. They're having to use the Thoron device. Is it Thoron or Thorion or something? Basically, a weapon that is used on a planetary scale to destroy all life on a ship. Which is really weird because it is by far the most complicated and fragile weapons system of the ship. Somehow that is still operational while everything else is offline. Bit weird, but alright. Anyway, long story short, you're saying, oh yeah, this would be so incredibly useful, we should see this again. Name me some times where this would be useful to see again, because I can't think of any before TNG rocks up, and by TNG they'll have other equipment that is also suitable for the job.
Word of Kirk and Sulu breaking bones out of prison should be all over Starfleet at this point, and the Enterprise the #1 search location. But these simple facts will not get in the way of the plot. Also,
this implies quite a lot of time transpires between them breaking bones out of prison and them getting on the Enterprise, when the reality is the time for them to do that is quite short. But they do very quickly realize that, yes, that is where that's what's happening. The Enterprise is being stolen. Who's it being stolen by? Well, it's being stolen by Kirk and a few others, right? So the idea here is, well, sorry, the sin here just isn't actually that valid, to be honest.
the movie will make it seem like hijacking and piloting a Starfleet vessel with a handful of people is easy, even though Star Trek Into Darkness would have us believe it takes a superhuman brain to create a super ship that is top secret, and oh my god, what have I become? The ship should need more people to operate, is all I meant to say.
Yeah, they don't make it look super easy. In fact, it's quite limited and it looks super difficult. And it's quite clearly stated that in order to set this up, Scotty needed to conduct repairs and also tie in all the automation systems in the process. So it's not portrayed as something that's easy, simple, or quick, or reliable, or fast. Because again, later in the film, we'll see that one shot will knock out the automation system, and the entire bridge crew here they're just locked out of doing anything. They can't do it. They're just dead in the water. So yeah, this is another classic one of Jeremy just not watching the film.
A chimpanzee and 2 trainees could run it.
Okay, first of all, that's racist against chimps and Starfleet trainees.
First of all, no, it's not. Chimps are a species, not a race. So they're not part of the human race, if that makes sense. They're a separate species. So you say it's offensive against chimps, but it doesn't mean it's racist. And secondly, Starfleet trainees are also not a race unless you only hire trainees of one particular race, but that in itself would already be racist, so no. I understand he's making a joke here, I'm just pointing out how the joke makes no sense.
Second of all, why does any starship go out with a crew of hundreds if they're this easy to run with 6 people?
They're not. I mean, he already sinned this point before, if you remember, so he's sinning the same point again, which was not even correct.
Third of all, is that velvet?
It might be. I'm surprised you're not talking about Chekhov's outfit, how he looks like a pilgrim at a school play. That outfit looks depressing, I'll be honest with you. But hey-ho, it is what it is.
This captain is clearly not captain material. This motherfucker files his nails.
What's wrong with filing your nails? Is being captain reliant on you having bits of untrimmed nails or unfiled nails? Everyone hates those bits. Are you more saying the fact that anyone who would file their nails is clearly not suitable for a leadership position because of the other personality traits that accompany the type of person who would file their nails. Because I would say no, not really, because we see a lot of different types of people in a lot of different types of roles in Star Trek. I don't think you can say, well, if you're filing your nails, you don't deserve to be captain. I don't think that's look, I don't want to delve more into this sin than is on the surface, but at the same time, I don't see how I can discredit this without delving further in. So I'm just going to leave it as, you're wrong, Jeremy, let's move on.
Excelsior powering up with orders to pursue.
Because we, the rogue stolen ship, can still see Starfleet ship status and active orders, naturally.
No, I imagine Chekhov probably just listened to the transmission like he did a few moments prior. It's, something that happened in the film.
I have no clue what Scotty did to override Starfleet's lockdown on the space doors. All we saw was Scotty and Kirk looking hopefully at them. I'm simply going to assume the reason they opened is bullshit and move on.
No, it's not bullshit. So Scotty does press a few buttons on his control panel, but essentially, because you're not shown what happens doesn't necessarily mean there's no reason for the doors to open, right? So it's not, opened by bullshit. So we don't actually explicitly see Scotty take out all of the kind of, not isolinear chips, because I think this is too early for those to exist, I want to say. But we see Scotty on the ship, but we don't see him sabotage it, right? Nor is that actually explicitly stated in any dialogue, but we accept that that happens. We don't see the steps between, on the at the docking port, the airlock, the Admiral says to everyone, yep, you get special commendation and, more importantly, extended shore leave. So we don't see how that happens, but then later, on the same day, Uhura is on the night shift in a transporter room. We don't see how Uhura gets there, or how she manages to get that post, right? We don't see that. But we don't have any problem accepting that that could happen. So just because we don't explicitly see it doesn't remove the possibility that it could happen. What we get as an audience is kind of information by context. You don't want to rely too heavily on information by context, because then you just have a lot of shit happening in the film and you need people to connect the dots very quickly, and a lot of people will kind of fall behind on that and start thinking, hang on, this film's awful. But here and there you can have things where you expect your audience to connect the dots. So here the implication is Scotty has done something somewhere at some point, as well as sabotaging the Excelsior, to also, I don't know, smuggle in some subroutine onto some computer somewhere that allows him to open the doors, right? Or he is right now trying to hack into the door mechanism to open it, or something like that, right? So that's the information by implication. So if you're going to say, well, we don't see any of that happen, therefore it's there's no reason why it opened other than bullshit, I would disagree. I'd say there's a reasonable amount of stuff the film can have without explicitly explaining it to the audience. So another example, in Marvel, in the very first Avengers, they're all flying around, and I say they're all flying around. Tony's flying around, that's understandable. The rest of them, they're all talking to each other, right? But if you look closely, I don't think any of them are actually wearing earpieces. And even if they are wearing earpieces, some of them have very uncomfortably tight outfits where you can very painfully tell they don't have a phone on them, right? They just don't. So how are they communicating? Right? Do you want a scene where they all suit up and they all put in their earpieces and they all pair them and they all just do a little mic check to make sure, oh, can you hear me? Okay, good. I'm not on mute. All right, good. Yeah, that's okay. Like, that would take away from the film. That would take away from the pacing. Don't need that in the film. So there's a certain degree of information that you can not communicate to people and it's still reasonable. I feel like this falls under that umbrella of reasonable assumption.
Also, if they have that kind of control over the space doors, they should be able to close it behind them and make sure that faster, better ship doesn't follow them, even if Scotty's.
Yeah, when you say that level of control, do you mean very panicking, trying desperately to open the doors, and they only open at the last second? Because if we're talking about that level of control, then I feel like we're talking about two different films, Jeremy.
Sabotage the other ship. Thank God for the plot of this movie that these were the only 2 starships anywhere in this area, as usual.
He kinda has a point, sort of. So the fact that no other ships intercept the Enterprise is a bit weird. We do get from the captain of the Excelsior, we do get a piece of dialogue that says, let's see if we can break some of Enterprise's speed records tomorrow. So that does imply that the Enterprise is one of the fastest ships in the fleet, if not the fastest. Or at least the fastest in active service. So we do have that piece of information that's dropped very subtly. But I would personally, I would say that actually the point that you raised here kind of has merit. Because before, in Star Trek The Motion Picture, when Jeremy said a similar thing, I corrected him by saying, actually, no, that is the closest Federation starship that can deal with this threat within range. Not just the closest Federation starship in range, but here, this is different. This is a different situation, different context. I would say, actually, having any starship intercept the Enterprise would be just as effective. Because you got to remember, Kirk is not really like there's a barrier, right? There's a difference between stealing the Enterprise and firing on a Federation starship, firing on one of your own. So there is a difference there. So I feel like having any ship, even if it is an Oberth class or a Miranda class, or any ship that's kind of on paper outclassed by a Constitution class, that would make sense. But then the reality is, this isn't any Constitution class. This is a battle-damaged Enterprise, granted patched up by Scotty, but also running on automation systems. So, yeah, pretty much any ship could present quite a big problem for the Enterprise to deal with. Anyway, very long-winded way of saying, actually, Jeremy, you got a point. Well done.
We're the only 2 starships anywhere in this area, as usual.
Here, Doctor. Souvenir.
Except for the as usual part, I disagree with that. Otherwise, good point.
From one surgeon to another.
All that stuff I stole from the other ship's transwarp drive, I have them right here for you to look at, because that's fun.
It is fun, and that's the kind of person Scotty is, and yeah, yeah. I don't know. He's just pointed out part of the film and said, "Oh yeah, this is a sin." It's like, well, no. All you've done here is describe the film and say it's fun, which it is a very fun moment. So, okay.
Best speed to Genesis.
Even though that prison break was a kind of fun scene, it's taken nearly 50 minutes for the Enterprise to finally Star Trek 3. This
No, it hasn't taken the Enterprise nearly 50 minutes to Star Trek 3. So, that prison scene was very cool, but that didn't last 50 minutes, because they did a lot, from getting back from the Genesis planet, to having the discussion with the Admiral, to then having a little, get-together at Kirk's apartment, to then having a chat with Sarek, to then reviewing the logs, to then having another chat with the Admiral, to then stealing the Enterprise. So there's quite a bit of setup there. Quite a lot happened in that 50 minutes. So you can say, you can make an argument for that, but honestly, I think the events that happened before they embark on their journey were quite entertaining to watch. But to each their own, I suppose. But I would say that's not an objective problem with the film.
unclothed child should probably be a dead Spocksicle.
Captain Spock.
Alright, so this here, unclothed child should probably be a dead Spocksicle. Firstly, well done for the use of Spocksicle. But secondly, I kind of agree. I kind of agree. So I'll just say this right now. There is we see the footprints going into the snow, and then we cut away. We have some shenanigans with the Enterprise, and then we cut back. So for the audience, you get the feeling that all right, a not insubstantial amount of time has passed. Cool. Um, we could make a headcanon argument to say, oh, well, Vulcans are more resilient, they're tougher than humans, and maybe they have a natural immunity or resilience to the cold. We're not told that, we're not shown that, we're not given any information about that. We have kind of general knowledge about Vulcans vaguely, but we're not explicitly given a reason why Spock has, or at least child Spock has any, it doesn't have any difficulty surviving here. So he should be having some either. I mean, obviously, you don't want to kill him in the film that brings him back because that would be a bit of a bummer. But you probably need to have like a lot more serious health effects here. So things like slightly blue in the face, and maybe some kind of a bit of frostbite here and there. Just kind of you can have that there, and then you can just say something about something Genesis, something as he grows, he heals and regenerates or something. I don't know, but I do think it's a bit weird how this child is here in the middle of a blizzard and he is a bit cold, and then they wrap him up in a robe and he's kind of all right and not absolutely freezing his ass off.
Be a dead Spocksicle.
Captain Spock.
Okay, I need you to go through this whole range of emotions here, and perfect.
I mean, how would you react to that news? Genuine question. I feel like as a reaction shot, that works very nicely.
All the same, I'm going to advise Starfleet and get instructions.
I need to pad my most cautious captain statistics in time for the Whispering Rose Awards banquet. Captain Buford won last year, and by God, he will not get a second.
Yeah, he's very cautious. That is the running theme of that captain. But when you peel it away, it doesn't reveal any problems with the film. It actually shows you another layer. So with the Genesis planet, Starfleet have chosen to send this ship and this captain. So they've chosen to send a no-berth ship captained by this man. And you start to understand the reason why. So they don't want to send a military ship, right? They don't want to send a heavy ship because that will be seen as, a military operation. So they want to send a science ship. But they don't want to send an actual science ship that's going to be seen doing science, because that's going to be a bit of a problem when you're trying to say, oh no, promise, we've stopped working on it. And someone's going to say, well, you sent this ship that's conducting scientific experiments here. So sent this science ship that is captained by someone who will not do a single solitary thing without prior authorization from Starfleet. He will report anything and everything and will wait for Starfleet to tell him what to do. I think that is such a nice, subtle little thing that fits very neatly into the overall premise of the film. So you haven't just got a quirky captain who does this. You have a set of reasoning that you can imagine taking place in choosing which ship and which captain to send over. So I really like that detail, that this captain is super careful, right?
The moral of this story is stop being so goddamn careful all the time. You might get blown up by a surprise Klingon ship run by Doc Brown.
Yeah, that's a joke technically, but it's one of those Brooklyn Nine-Nine jokes. Sorry, I don't have anything against Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but it's just one of those jokes where it's like, it happens, you can acknowledge it happens, but to be honest, most people will have a stone face. It is a stone face joke.
Protomatter. An unstable substance which every ethical scientist in the galaxy has denounced as dangerously unpredictable.
Yeah, but if we're talking about the creation of life on desolate planets anyway, where's the ethics line drawn? We're gonna have to shame Kirk's kid for breaking the rules on a project like this?
Yeah, a little bit. So he's talking about, well, where are the ethical lines drawn? Well, how about creating life on a planetary scale, and that life will last a matter of days before having to undergo a very, very aggressively self-destruct on a planetary scale. literally Genesis breaks itself down. So I would say creating any life on a planetary scale only to see absolute mass destruction. I would say there's some ethical lines being crossed there, yeah. Even if that life is just trees and stuff, it still feels a bit wrong and not correct. Um, but also, should any life develop here? Because I think they mention eventually animals will form. They can place whatever life forms they deem fit, but at this stage, Genesis shouldn't have any animals, but they will form. So, and we also see the Genesis cave was largely stable, but the planet was not. So one could make the argument that, well, if it was on a small moon, it might go through the process and result in a more stable result, at least stable to a point where animal life will develop before the Genesis matrix just starts to break apart. So again, we're talking about ethical lines here. I think the ethical lines are pretty clear cut.
Send Captain Esteban my compliments.
But make sure to do it in a careful manner. He'll like that.
Okay, as a joke, I liked that. It was sharp, it was snappy, it had a punchline, and the setup was also the dialogue that Kirk said. So I like that. That was a good joke. I mean I didn't laugh, I didn't chuckle, I didn't smirk, but it had that same Brooklyn Nine-Nine feel. But this one was just, I feel like the bar was a bit higher here.
This goes on for some time.
Yes, it does. I'm also surprised that Jeremy doesn't make a sex joke, because this is Vulcan foreplay. That's what this is. So I'm really surprised he doesn't actually make any sex jokes. So cool. I'm also surprised he doesn't make any pedo jokes, because he did that with what was it? Colin Stevens? Stephen Collins? I can't remember his name. But he does make a couple of pedo jokes with him. But here we see Savick, who is about to go through Pon farr with Spock. I say she's not going through Pon farr, but she's going to kind of go through it with him. I find it a bit weird that, yeah, I mean, chronologically, this guy is not actually very old. He's like, what, less than a day? And I know Savick said Pon farr starts from their adult life, but this still looks like kind of a teenager, to be honest. It's a bit uncomfortable. If you dig into that direction, it does. Yeah, it's a bit weird. It's also a bit weird because, right, presumably, every 7 years this needs to happen, but Spock goes through these like growths, and he doesn't seem to need to have sex again throughout the entirety of this growing process. So, and some of this process happens when they're captured by Klingons as well. Do you think that's what he's experiencing at the final end bit, where he's just like on the ground, really? Well, no, because that's implied that the Genesis planet is breaking apart, and Spock is also feeling that because they're tied. Yeah, I don't know. It's really weird. It's a very inconsistent thing, but I'm surprised Jeremy didn't make any sex jokes here.
Goes on for some time. Now that we've cloaked, here's a shot of Krug's dog for no reason.
I mean, I wouldn't say no reason. That dog looks pretty cool, right? Let's watch. Actually, I'm going to watch that scene again. Yeah, you know what? It is just a random shot of Krug's Targ. So, yeah, I guess that is true. That is just. It doesn't have a narrative purpose. It's not communicating anything to the audience, really. So, yeah, he kind of got a point there. That is just a random shot of his dog for some reason. I mean, I don't think it makes the film egregiously bad, but you could sin it if you like. I'll happily yield that's a valid sin.
What do I find? A weakling human, a Vulcan boy, and a woman.
That's racist 3 times.
I hate to say this, Jeremy, but women aren't a race. He doesn't refer to Savik's race. He does refer to the Vulcan as a boy, which I don't feel like is racist. And he refers to, he refers to David as what is it, a weakly human or a weakling human? Either way, that's the only part that you could say is a bit racist. That's it. But the rest, I don't really see how. If if anything, he says woman in a bit of a derisive way. He says it in a bit of a sexist way. I think that's just like him doing the character of Krug, because or that, or it's just the way kind of his cadence in the way he speaks. Maybe just put a bit of unfortunate emphasis, and then 40 years later, referring to women in that same cadence is kind of reminiscent of a certain group of people, shall we say.
A weakling human, a Vulcan boy, and a woman.
That's racist.
To be honest, he refers to all of them in the same cadence, so I don't think that's too much of a problem.
3 times.
Federation starship approaching.
Bring me up.
How come a bird of prey Klingon ship can't fire while cloaked, at least until undiscovered country, but it can beam people in and out while cloaked? It's always bugged me.
Cool. Something that's always bugged you is not a sin with the film, but I will explain a little bit. I will explain a little bit. So, the way cloaking devices work, as I understand it, it requires a tremendous amount of power, and what they're doing is they're creating an intense gravitational field around the hull of the ship in order to cloak the vessel by basically bending light around it. So the light that would hit the back of the ship goes around the ship, and the light that would hit the front of the ship goes around it, and the light that would hit the top goes around it and through the bottom, right? So that's the general idea. So you have gravitons, which are the exchange particle for gravity, much like electrons are the exchange particle for electricity. But you have gravitons that are... Oh, by the way, as of recording this video, we don't actually know for sure that gravitons, or at least, well, when I last did physics, the exchange particle for gravity, we've not actually confirmed the existence of gravitons. We can only imply its existence through context, that somehow energy is being transferred, and thus there must be a transfer particle. But, the reality is this might be very different. It might just work in a very different way. We're not entirely sure. Or at least I'm not entirely sure. Some scientists might be able to disprove that. It might already have been disproved by the time I'm recording this. But basically, gravitons are the exchange particle, theoretically, to my knowledge, for gravity. So in the future, you have these deflector dishes that can generate large quantities of particles in exchange for a large cost in power. So one of those particles is the graviton, and so generating a tremendous number of gravitons and augmenting that field, augmenting the emission of gravitons to generate this field constantly, is a tremendous amount of power, right? But we know that transporter beams are not affected by gravity because they don't have mass, right? It's just pure energy. Whereas physical projectiles and energy projectiles, to an extent, are affected by gravitons or gravity. So if you wanted to fire through a cloak, you would have to fire through this dense field of gravitons. And the reality is, even if you could penetrate that field, it's very likely that whatever you fire will be distorted and redirected, so you wouldn't be able to fire accurately. So that's like the sci-fi mumbo-jumbo as I understand it. Because I think disruptive particles are a thing, which means that they have mass, and they would, even if slightly, they would be affected by gravity. Same goes for phasers, I want to say. But the reality of the situation is either you're going to fire through your cloaking field and it's going to be wildly inaccurate, with a potential possibility of it doing a 180 and hitting you, or you're going to fire and it's going to penetrate through that field of gravitons and it's just going to punch a hole through it, and that'll destabilize and dissipate your cloak. So either you lose the cloak or you just aren't able to functionally use your weapons. So that's a very long-winded explanation. The reality is, this film doesn't need to explain how cloaking works for you to understand the sequence of events that happen in the film. You just need to understand that by context they need to decloak to fire, which is mentioned in the film. So the film does a perfectly serviceable job of describing what happens. If you want to then further complain about certain things not being spoon-fed to you, you can. Just know that that's not entirely valid.
There, that distortion, see it?
And Kirk just made cloaking technology obsolete, or else it was never very good to begin with, or else no one prior to Kirk bothered to use their eyes instead of the sensors?
Yeah, this is a weird one. So Jeremy just cuts out an entire portion of the film where Chekhov says, "I thought I saw something. I swear it was a scout ship." And then they go like scouring, trying to look for it. And then Krug, in his infinite wisdom, decides he's going to approach on a direct course, nose to nose, right underneath the Enterprise's nose. And while the Enterprise is visually trying to find a starship. So you're talking about, oh, Kirk has made cloaking obsolete? No, he hasn't. The fact that there is a distortion doesn't mean that the cloaking device is obsolete at this time. Obviously, as sensors become more sophisticated, older cloaking devices become obsolete, as we see in Star Trek Voyager. But I will say, yeah, the likelihood of someone actually being on the lookout for this is very low. It's like in World War II, you know, a U-boat would need to surface to fire off torpedoes, I think, to my knowledge. So you could say, oh, well, anyone with binoculars can see a U-boat, so that makes them obsolete, right? No, not really. Not with your eyes, at least. It's very unlikely that you happen to be looking at the right place at the right time to see this. You could say that, well, radar will eventually make that obsolete, and you're right. But you could make the argument that it's incredibly lucky that Kirk notices this. That would be a genuine sin, but or at least that would be a sin with more merit than this one. But as it stands right now, this is not a valid sin, I'm afraid.
No shields? My guess is right. They'll have to decloak before they can fire.
Yeah, but why can't you raise your shields and fire? Have I not seen countless Star Treks where they had their shields up and were still able to shoot enemy ships? I mean, the
Yep, so what do you think happens when Krug will approach an enemy starship and he sees on their approach, he sees that the starship raises their shields? That's like a dead giveaway that you detect them. I know it's not explicitly stated here that this is what Kirk is thinking of, but this is... It's not something where I'm creating headcanon, per se. Even though it's not explicitly stated in the film, this is just like the most logical thing that you could think of where, yeah, you know what, if you approach someone and they raise their shields, chances are they can in some way, shape or form detect you. So you would probably back off and try a different approach because what you're about to do doesn't work or won't work. Anyway, long-winded explanation for essentially saying, Jeremy, please think for more than 5 seconds.
And despite giving their full power to the weapon systems, 2 torpedoes don't destroy the Klingon ship at all.
Sir, the shield...
They do a tremendous amount of damage, but you also need to keep into account that full power to the weapon system, or it says all power to the weapon system, not that the weapon systems are fully powered, but I find it a bit weird that they don't fire any phasers. And torpedoes, I don't know if you know this, but the energy they carry, the detonation, is based on antimatter. So that's the yield of the torpedo, which is, you know, the yield regardless of the power levels of your ship. So having weapon systems on minimum power and full power doesn't really matter to the amount of antimatter in a torpedo. But I would say that 2 torpedoes shield down on a bird of prey. You could argue about armor and stuff, but it does feel a little bit convenient. But that's not the point Jeremy raised. He raised the fact that the Enterprise is on full power. The weapon system don't destroy the Klingon ship. I'm not saying they should destroy the Klingon ship. I'm saying they should do a lot more damage, regardless of the weapon power level of the Enterprise. So, yeah, I would say this is not actually the sin Jeremy is thinking of.
And despite giving their full power to the weapon systems, 2 torpedoes don't destroy the Klingon ship at all.
Sir, the shield's non-responsive.
The automation system's overloaded. I didn't expect to take us into combat, you know.
Oh, come on. You couldn't bring this up until now? Where were your concerns before this happened? And what a bunch of bullshit to create artificial conflict.
It doesn't create artificial conflict because no one's pissy at Scotty about this. Like, no one kicks off and starts. Maybe, maybe in like a reboot, or maybe in like Kurtzman era Trek, someone would kick off in a very dramatic way. But no, not in this iteration of Star Trek where people actually behave like grown-ups. You could make an argument, and in fact, I think that is the argument Jeremy is making, that this should have been brought up before, and what a bunch of bullshit it is to create well, that last bit I don't agree with, but you couldn't bring this up until now. I kind of agree with. So, even the moment that Kirk suspects that there's a bird of prey, or at least a cloaked ship, Scotty could just briefly mention, I didn't configure the automation system for combat. Be wary, or be cautious, or be something. I don't know. Right? He could give some sort of warning before this happens. So yeah. If Scotty knew this was going to happen, he should have mentioned it. Yep. So I feel like this is, at least the first half of this sin is kind of valid.
Shield is non-responsive, but can't you still fire some torpedoes? Or is automation overload code for we can't do anymore?
Right. Automation system is overloaded. Well, that kind of means that Scotty needs to kind of sort some stuff out before they can fire again. Because, the automation system is overloaded. Like, you can just get this from context, right? You don't need to have Scotty sit there and give you a full presentation about how the automation system works. You can just pick some of this stuff up from context. So the information that's not directly spoon-fed but is available by context, Jeremy is basically complaining that it's not spoon-fed. It's like, well, of course it's not. This is a film. This film can't just pause and give you an infomercial before continuing on. That's not how films work. Jeremy, man who has apparently worked in cinema for however many years, doesn't understand this concept.
Do anymore. Kirk survives this.
We see people in Star Trek survive various explosions. This is part of the course, really. What is a bit weird is the fact that, like, what looks like fairly close to the impulse dome is hit, and the bridge explodes. And that happens in The Wrath of Khan as well. I mean, that happens in pretty much every Star Trek show ever. Something gets hit, it's not on the bridge, but the bridge explodes. Why? Reasons, I guess. No clue. So, like, if that, if that was your sin, I'd say you'd have a point to make there, but you just say, oh, Kirk survives this. Well, kinda, yeah. Like, this isn't something that's presented as, yeah, this should kill Kirk.
I don't know why we didn't bring some sort of blaster with us down here, so a knife will have to do, I guess. I can't see how anything could go wrong.
They did bring blasters. This is characterizing the Klingons as brutal, more brutal than they need to be. We actually see when Krug fights the evolved microbes, he directly tells, well, I say directly, he basically just holsters his weapon, I think, and then tells whoever's with him to put his gun down. he picks this up, he kind of grips it, he lets it kind of strangle him for a bit to have a bit of, get the adrenaline pumping, and then he kills it. Then he reports back to the ship, yeah, nothing's happening here. And, like, for anyone else, that would be kind of, well, one, that would be a tremendously stupid thing to do, but also, two, that would be okay, we have something to report here. One of us nearly died. So again, there's a lot of characterization for the Klingons in this film, and this is part of that characterization. So saying, oh yeah, I can't see anything going wrong with them killing someone with a knife. I don't know why they wouldn't use a blaster. Well, if these were Romulans, yeah, I imagine they would use a blaster. If they were Ferengi, I imagine they'd use a blaster. I also just want to note, blaster is a Star Wars term. Realistically, disruptor is what a Klingon would use, but sure, we can see that Jeremy is more of a Star Wars fan than a Star Trek fan, but I'm not going to hold that against him. But I'm just going to note that that is something I've noticed.
Could go wrong. Oh no, something went wrong.
I don't think so. I think probably the Klingons are quite happy that he got to have a fight. I think executing prisoners is a rather dull thing for a Klingon to do. But yeah, you want to say something went wrong? Yeah, David jumped out. The Klingon beat the crap out of David and stabbed him in the chest. Absolutely nothing went wrong, to be honest. But whatever, Jeremy, whatever.
Well, at least they got the one out of the three that isn't integral to the plot.
Are you sure about that? Also, I just want to note, in The Wrath of Khan, Savick pulls David down before Tyrell fires. And now in this film, David jumps on someone about to kill Savick. I just like that. It's poetry. It rhymes. I like that little detail. But also, I would say, hang on, what was this point again? Sorry. Oh yeah, at least he got one out of the three that isn't integral to the plot. The one out of the three that isn't... Okay, so I would say that other than Spock down there, none of them are integral to the plot. Savick doesn't actually do anything the entire film other than hold Spock's hand. Anyone can do that, or Spock can just sit on the ground and whimper and cry, which is what he kind of does from now on until the end of the Genesis planet and they leave. That's kind of all he does. Sort of. But then you have David, the actual Genesis scientist, who is very integral to the main plot point of the film, which is Krug wanting the Genesis material. So I would say he's pretty important. And he's also Kirk's son, which is also pretty important. So yeah, them killing off David is not exactly oh no, they killed off someone who was... I genuinely didn't know which one they were going to kill off. They could have stabbed Spock, and then Spock does some weird regeneration thing because he's tied to the planet. I don't know. Anything could have happened, really. But he sat here saying, oh no, they killed the one that was totally going to die because he's not plot relevant. It's like, well, no, David isn't a red shirt in this situation. He is actually a character, and killing him off is actually a big move.
Integral to the plot.
Klingon bastard, you've killed my son.
You knew him for like 2 hours. Don't get all dramatic about it.
Okay. Kirk has known of David for a lot longer than 2 hours. It's entirely possible that Kirk might have met David when he was very young, and David just didn't remember. So that's bogus. I would also say, how long do you need to know someone to get upset that they died? And also, did I mention that they've known each other for longer than 2 hours? Because they've known each other for longer than 2 hours, and they've gone through an entire arc together. They've gone through, life and death together. They fought Khan together. Granted, David wasn't the one doing much of the fighting, but he was there, and he did kind of, to a degree, help in identifying the Genesis particle and how much time they have and estimating that. So, yeah, I would say that this is perfectly valid for Kirk to get upset about, the fact that he's now lost his son. And not only is it like, oh no, I lost someone who I've known for X amount of time. It's, well, I had a son, and all of the things that I could have done with that son, all of the times I could have had, all the moments I could have had, are now gone, right? So it's not just my son and all those memories now gone. It's my son and all the memories I could have made are now gone. And yeah, you don't need to know someone for very long, especially for their family, to have this reaction. Perfectly valid.
Klingon bastard.
Oh yeah, I forgot. That's racist.
I mean, this is the point in which Kirk does become a bit racist towards Klingons, and that gets brought up in Star Trek 6. So, kinda, yeah, this is the first time where Jeremy says, oh, that's racist, and he's actually right. Kind of, but, you know, whatever.
Destruct Sequence 2, Code 1, 1A.
I love how these assholes have working self-destruct codes for a decommissioned ship they f***ing stole from Space Dock.
Show me the point in the film where they send someone over to go wipe the memory banks of the Enterprise. Show me the point. Show me the person who went aboard and just removed all of the access codes, right? I mean, they arrived in such a just like, you know, such a shambling state, the Enterprise. I say shambling state, you know, it was patched up by Scotty, but realistically it was in need of repair. And you just kind of sat there like, oh yeah, no, I can't believe that they still have access codes for a ship that, you know, just for context, the Admiral spoke about decommissioning it, and then the same day they steal it. Like, that's the time frame we're talking about right now. It's not like the Enterprise was sat there for a month, and then they just kind of hopped in and everything worked from the get-go. You know, it's not like, oh jeez. I only vaguely have seen some clips of Star Trek Picard, but there's one clip where they take the cloaking device of one ship and they like in a fleet museum and they just use that, and it's like, okay, in what universe is that cloaking device in working order? You know, like what? And also, in what universe is that cloaking device even still relevant? We see Voyager can kind of just see straight through older cloaking devices from the 23rd century. We're in the 25th century now, and, you know, we can still see that. Anyway, sorry. Minor gripe. Everyone keeps saying Star Trek Picard is amazing. I think it's awful. And I will at some point go through and tell everyone exactly why I think it's awful, why Discovery is awful, and why Strange New Worlds is awful, and why Lower Decks is kind of alright, but only because it doesn't take itself seriously. But the moment it tries to take itself seriously, it's awful. I will go over all of that because I do very much want to, but I will also address all of Jeremy's videos and kind of also take a look at other videos as well. Just kind of get into the swing of things, really.
Waiting final code for 1 minute countdown.
Code 000.
So basically the final self-destruct password for Enterprise is password then?
I mean, there's 3 separate passwords and authorization codes, or whatever you want to call them. And then the final one is 4 digits. So, kind of, I guess. Yeah, you could make that argument, but then I'd also say, well, yeah, there's 3 other passwords you got to enter beforehand, so, yeah.
Can transporter bays really handle this kind of complex multiple asshole beaming? Especially since the ship was just hit and apparently has very little power. This feels like a new level of bullshit, even for transporter beams.
No. That's the honest answer. So, the automation control center gets hit, but engineering doesn't get hit. You know, Kirk says emergency lights because they got hit, but he doesn't say switch to emergency power, auxiliary power, doesn't say switch to batteries. Doesn't say any of that, right? They're not on low power mode, right? The problem is they no longer have control over all of the ship systems from the bridge. That's their problem, right? So you're sat here saying, oh, well, how come the transporter pad can do a beam out and then a beam in? Because it's a transporter pad. That's what they do. They beam people out, they beam people in. This is literally the only thing they're designed to do. And you're complaining, oh, no, but they did it in quick succession. So, we're not showing that they can't do that. I mean, yeah. Sorry, it's just such a stupid thing to mention, where it's like, oh, well, this is clearly a contradiction. It's like, well, what's it contradicting? You just created your own little headcanon here, and you're now saying, oh, it doesn't make sense to my headcanon. cool. Well done. It doesn't make sense in your headcanon. Let's move on now. Sorry. That was really aggressive, but I just... Sometimes I do get a bit... Well, not tired per se, but I just hear the same points over and over and over and over, and people seem to think that their headcanon is right. And I see people not only who, like, sin these films, who kind of think of flaws. I see a lot of people who try and defend the film use their headcanon to kind of wishy-wash away all of the criticism. I'm just sat here like, well, no, that doesn't actually do anything. I can create my own headcanon as well that has just as much justification. It might make less sense, but the justification for it is still the same. And I can just say, well, actually, I think the Enterprise is powered by antimatter flavored ice cream and not antimatter. And there's nothing you can say to disprove me. I can say that antimatter is the consistence of ice cream. You can't say anything. Because realistically, there's nothing there to disprove me. There's just as much evidence that it's a liquid, a solid, a gas as it is ice cream. This kind of like sludgy kind of between phase.
I, for one, am glad that the Enterprise's self-destruct sequence allows for the cinematically pleasing throwing of fools into the air before the whole ship explodes. Enterprise.
Yeah, what's happening here is all the consoles are exploding, so this is a self-destruct sequence. So all of the computers, all of the computery things, all of the stuff that could be used, could be kind of ransacked as material, that's getting destroyed, right? That's what the initial smaller explosions are, because you saw initially when the bird of prey shot the cargo ship, there are some very large chunks that survived. And in those large chunks, there's a very distinct possibility that a lot of material could be recovered. So here, that's what the self-destruct is doing, right? That's why we see several small explosions before seeing one big explosion.
Enterprise wreckage just tells me they'll find a way to dramatically pleasing throwing of fools into the air before the whole ship explodes. Enterprise wreckage just tells me they'll find a way to rebuild this for the next movie, which is about whales, by the way.
Okay. There's a genuine sin here, and the genuine sin is the self-destruct only destroys the front half of the saucer section. And that's it. You got an entire warp drive here that you could actually detonate, but instead you choose not to. Interesting. Right? Very, very, very interesting. What I would say is actually about this sin, sorry, not talking about the miss sin, about the sin that Jeremy mentions. Half of the ship gets destroyed. Whatever doesn't get destroyed here will get burned up in the atmosphere of the planet below. Whatever doesn't get burnt up in the atmosphere will have a hard landing on the surface. Whatever survives that hard landing is now on the surface of a planet that itself self-destructs. It turns into a big volcano and it is an absolute nightmare. What about this film tells you that they're going to recover this ship? And I would also ask you that they're going to find a way to rebuild this for the next movie, which is about whales. They aren't on the Enterprise in the next movie. They're on the Bounty, which is what they chose to name Krug's ship. So there's just a lot of things going on right here, right now, but this point is not valid for a variety of reasons.
Puberty strength.
What happened?
Yeah, Vulcans are twice as strong as humans. We see in the original series, Spock can break some stuff with his bare hands. He's very strong, but the only reason we don't see him do that stuff is discipline, but we definitely do see his strength factor in from time to time. So, yeah, Spock throwing a dude while, on crazy Genesis energy kind of makes sense, yeah.
Happened.
He gave his life to save us.
Space Jesus, son of Kirk.
No. So, Space Jesus is not from space, he just works in space. Cool little reference. Secondly, Jesus did not save anyone. So let's just, yeah, Space Jesus, yeah, he gave his life to save us. So Jesus gave his life to save us from sin. Not to save us in a literal sense, but to save us in a kind of spiritual, metaphorical sense of inherently all humans are flawed, but Jesus gave his life to forgive these flaws. I'm not a religious person, but I do think religion is part of the world, and if you want to understand parts of the world, you need to understand religion to an extent. And that also extends to people misunderstanding religions for a variety of reasons. So, that does include things like the hypocrisy of using, religion as a tool to do a lot of very cruel things. But it also does include religion being used for very genuine things like, relief effort. But then it also expands to things like people going on, you have missionaries who are going off to spread their religion to parts of the world which really don't need that form of religion. And in some instances, they get themselves killed in very stupid ways by visiting these uncontacted tribes. Yeah, so look, religion, it's a tough one, it's a tricky one, but the reality is, yeah, this doesn't track. As a joke, like, I get he's making a joke, whatever, but it just doesn't actually make sense as a joke in itself.
Star Trek 3 really loved mauve, or really loved washing white Starfleet tops in the same load as red Starfleet pants. One of them.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that color palette seems to be quite common in this film for some reason, and I'm not sure why. But I do like it. I do think it looks good. But Jeremy does have a point here, and he does make an amusing joke about washing whites with reds, so fair dues.
Other two. Man, that is some Lion King level rock movement right there. And Krug didn't even need to sing a song.
I have not seen The Lion King, but I will agree that that rock movement is very convenient.
Planet, created by an artificial godlike substance, is playing the Deus Ex Machina to perfection during this fight.
Not really. So, the planet is doing a variety of things. Some of it will benefit Kirk and friends, some of it will benefit Krug and friends, although he's the only one on the planet right now, I think. But yeah, they will benefit different people, right? But also, the planet is doing a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So, if the planet was only doing stuff that directly impacted the fight, and it only affected one or even both parties, to be honest, yeah, you'd have a leg to stand on and say, well, this is Deus Ex Planeta, or whatever it is you say. But it really isn't. This planet is, falling apart. Kirk and Krug, they fight. They find themselves at a cliff face. Kirk pushes Krug, basically kicks him over, and then the kind of ledge gives way, and then Krug grips, and Kirk offers his hand. Krug, instead of grabbing his hand, grabs his foot and tries to drag Kirk off the edge, and Kirk is just like, he just takes a moment, it's like, really? Okay. And he just kicks Krug repeatedly until he falls off. I wouldn't say this is the planet just coming in clutch last possible second and saving Kirk, because that's not really what happens. But again, with the scenes that he includes in his videos, you wouldn't get that full context, but that is the full context.
Is he falling sideways?
You know how wind resistance works, because not everything falls like, head first straight down. Some people fall sideways. It does happen very briefly, until, they do. No, it does happen, right? People, they don't orient themselves directly head first. They're not cats, right? I mean, not that cats orient themselves head first, they orient themselves feet first, but you get the idea. Also, fun fact, you can throw a cat off of any size building, and I'm fairly sure and again, it depends on the weight and mass of the cat, but I'm fairly sure at terminal velocity for a cat, because terminal velocity is different for every type of object, they can land safely, and actually there's like a set height where cats are more likely to die not because they are reaching terminal velocity, but because they don't have enough time to orient themselves so that their feet absorb the impact. So that's a fun little scientific fact for all of you that is vaguely correct, at least from what I gather from something that I read some years ago, which might no longer be correct, or it might not have ever been correct, to be honest. Take it with a big pinch of salt.
More! Johnny 2! Luckily, Beam Me Up is the only Klingon Kirk knows.
It's the only Klingon Kirk knows because Krug says it like 5 minutes before now.
Needs to work on the Christopher Lloyd impression, but he probably knew Maltz wouldn't ask questions about that.
I would say to that, firstly, he does get the general kind of tone of the voice correct, and he gets the cadence correct as well. But the reality is this film does actually go out of its way to show you that communications from the surface of the Genesis planet do have some interference, and that interference results in lower audio quality. So it's almost like in anticipation of this particular point where Kirk manages to give the command, even though it doesn't sound quite like Krug. That is almost the setup for that direct point. So I would say that it's still not a valid sin, I'm afraid. The film beat you to the punch.
Oh yeah, Uhura. Too bad you had to sit this one out for some reason. Good job being here on Vulcan at the end for a celebratory hug.
Uhura didn't sit this one out. I don't know if you remember, but at the very start of the film, she actually manages to take control of a transporter pad, a transporter room, and beam them onto the ship, bypassing a lot of the guards and security lockouts and what have you. So again, she didn't sit this one out. She was part of the process in stealing the Enterprise, and then she arrived here. The exact details of that I can't comment on because the film doesn't exactly give us much more information. But to say she sat this one out, I get what Jeremy is saying. She wasn't there for the full experience, but at the same time, she knows a lot of stuff happened. I mean, for a start, Savick is there. Not really sure why that's happened. They're on a bird of prey. Not really sure how or why that happened. And you can see that, a lot of them, including Kirk, are looking a bit worse for wear. So, again, like, I don't know. This isn't a celebratory hug. This is more like a, man, you've gone through shit, but I'm glad to see you kind of hug. But, you know what? Let's carry on.
Without any explanations or conversations beforehand, they just drag Spock into this funeral ceremony, not briefing Bones on what he might have to do for Spock.
Sorry, what did you think was going to happen? Because I'm fairly sure they all knew that they were doing this for a funeral ceremony. And I would also say that Vulcan ceremonies are often kept private. You know, that's an established thing in Star Trek, even before this film. In the original series, Spock did keep a lot of his Vulcan ceremonies private. But yeah, sorry, let's just watch this for a moment.
Conversations beforehand, they just drag Spock into this funeral ceremony, not briefing Bones on what he might have to do for Spock to keep Spock alive, or any kind of Spock preparation at all. I mean, that's stupid.
Not really. Like, I mean, firstly, do you expect the film to just take time out so someone can sit down and just go through with the crew and just say, okay, well, here's your itinerary. If you take a look at page 1 of the leaflet, you'll see at 1 p.m. we're going to start the ceremony, and then at 2:15, that's when we all kind of go into the entrance hall, and 2:20, that's when the speech starts. Do you expect that to happen? Do you expect the film to take time to do that? Do you, just out of curiosity? Just no? And also, you're saying, oh, well, they didn't brief Bones on what he might need to do. Well, they do say explicitly, we don't expect you to understand fully what we need to do, just know there is considerable risk, as much risk to you as there is to Spock. And Bones just says, I'll take the risk, and then makes a little remark to Kirk, like, hell of a time to ask. Like after they've been through all of that crap, he's just suddenly going to say, "Actually, no, I'm going to take the safe option and not go through with this if that's all right." Yeah. So, like, a lot of ridiculous things being said by Jeremy right now, but just know that the general vibe is Jeremy just needs to watch the film.
No one even explained to Kirk how far he could go into this glorified funeral parlor. I guess no one had any conversations of any kind before going through with this.
Yeah, I thought that he stopped him fairly politely, but firmly, but fairly politely. It wasn't like egregiously like, "Oh, you've dishonored the traditions of the ceremony," and that's one thing I really hate about Star Trek. You know, these like aliens of the week, they just pop in and like there's a minor misunderstanding that is entirely understandable because, actually these people know nothing about each other, and then these aliens just get deeply, deeply, deeply offended by the most trivial thing, and all the while the, Federation are on eggshells, stepping around them and just yeah, these aliens can do very deeply offensive things to us, but on the flip side, that doesn't really seem to happen very often, where the aliens are just fairly chill and understanding. Anyway, sorry. I just like the fact that, yeah, Kirk is told, nope, you're not allowed to go any further, but they don't make a big deal out of it. Like, it's a fairly chill thing. They realize Kirk doesn't know much. They realize none of these people know much about the ceremony, but they don't make a big hoo-ha about it.
I ask for Fal Tor Pan, the refusion.
What you seek has not been done since ages past, and then only in legend. Your request is not logical.
Oh, but these three women holding up their right hands and wearing bunny ears is logical. Just do the...
Right. Okay. I know I just did a whole big personal gripe thing, but here's another personal gripe I have. Vulcans are not logical, right? Like let's just get that out there. Vulcans, they're not logical. It's only by a lot of practice, a lot of teaching, and a lot of focus and concentration that they become logical, right? But in their base state, Vulcans are not logical. They strive for total logic, some of them, but some of them also strive for enough logic where they can live a full productive life, right? But you will see Vulcans doing completely illogical things all the time just because you can't justify everything that happens with simple, pure logic. So some of these things are tradition, but some of these things you can just say as, well, why are these big stone kind of pillar things here? Why is that an angle? What's the logic in that? You could say, oh, because of rain, but it doesn't rain in Vulcan. Vulcan is a very arid climate. So where's the logic in having this? Where's the logic in having a big fire pit here? Where's the logic in that? It's already warm enough. Why do they have a big fire pit? Where's the logic in putting Spock on a table? Why don't they just put him on the floor? I mean, the floor looks clean enough, right? Do they need to have him on a table? They could just crouch down. Why do they have a chair here? Why is that chair made out of wood? Why... You can just go on. You can go on and on and on and on. Why does this person have a staff? What's the logical reason why this person is holding a staff here? Or what's the logical reason why this person is wearing a hood that looks like I don't know, some worm weaved it over his head? Why does it look like he's wearing a cocoon over his head? Like, and you can keep going on about all of the things that any Vulcan does at any point in time, until the point at which you just break down and you realize that actually, no, Vulcans are not logical. They're never meant to be creatures of pure logic. They were meant to be creatures that are fallible, right? Fallible in their logic, but also a actual reason for following that logic. It's not a biological trait that they have to be logical. It's something they strive to be as logical as they can, right? But sorry, this is a very long rant, but it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what Vulcans actually are, and you can just really use this argument to justify some very stupid things. So we could go back and say, well, these people are logical. Why don't they have handrails here? Surely that would be logical, right? But then if they do have handrails, you could be like, oh, well, why do they have handrails? Because surely, logically, if they're all logical and sensible, none of them would trip, right? So why would they need handrails? You can discredit anything and everything that you see on Vulcan as being either logical or illogical, due to your own personal kind of opinions. And the reality is, this is just how Vulcans are, right? They accept that ceremonies are a part of their society, but that is not illogical because ceremony can have an actual function for the mind and the soul, and the mind and the soul, as much as you might want to say, is illogical. There is some logic in having a process for this, right? There's some logic in acknowledging and honing these elements of the self. So, again, very long-winded way of me saying Jeremy just fundamentally doesn't understand how Vulcans work, and I think this is... I don't want to blame just Jeremy, because this is a problem a lot of people have, and I see it quite often. But yeah, right.
Just do the Faltor pan, lady. Can someone tell me why I'm aroused right now? Is it all the cross dissolves and intimate close-ups that are fooling me into thinking I'm watching softcore porn? Literally over 5...
No. I can tell you why you think you're aroused right now. Because it's not the cameras, it's not that, it's not the lighting. Okay, I watched this film at the cinema. I'm not old enough to have watched this film when it came out at the cinema, but since then they've done like a retro screening at a cinema. So watching this on a 1080p screen on YouTube with compression, it looks fine, right? I mean, you can kind of see the shadows here. The outline is maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but, largely it's fine. Everything is covered. When you're watching this on the big screen, in HD, on a massive screen at the cinema, you see a lot more than you bargained for. I'm just going to say that. So, like, I will say that is a little uncomfortable. But, yeah, that's probably what Jeremy's referring to when he thinks, oh, why do I think I'm watching softcore porn? It's because these people are wearing very thin material, and the lighting is not particularly hiding much, shall we say. Anyway, right, that's... I mean, I'm not counting that as a valid sin, by the way, but if Jeremy did mention the attire of some of these individuals, I would probably agree. I'm a bit surprised he hasn't, to be fair, but, whatever.
5 minutes of ceremonial Vulcan bull we already know the outcome of. So, Bone...
We don't already know the outcome of, to be honest. Outcome? Sorry, I pronounced that weird. So, the outcome of the ceremony is Spock gets a soft reset. So he basically is the same Spock that we see in Star Trek The Motion Picture. He's purged all of his emotions and he's like purely logical, right? Even though he recounts the events of what happened in this film, he does have a soft reset. So we don't really know exactly what's going to happen here, and the fact that this is one of many possibilities showcases that. So some other possibilities are, Bones could be kind of a bit quirky and messed up from this, right? Spock could also be a bit quirky and messed up from this. It could be that actually Spock comes back, but he's not really like himself. It could be that it's unlikely that the whole thing will fail and be for nothing, but a lot of things could happen that don't necessarily mean we just get the old Spock that we saw from The Wrath of Khan, and that is exactly what happened. We don't get the old Spock from The Wrath of Khan. So in saying, oh yeah, we all know the outcome of this, well, no, we don't. And in saying that, it's a bit weird because the implication is that the film doesn't really make any decisions that can't be reversed, where you just hit the big reset button. That's not true. The Enterprise is gone. They are kicked out of Starfleet for treason. David is dead. He's gone. Genesis is destroyed. So kind of the events of Star Trek The Motion Picture are kind of reverted in a way. A lot of things happen in this film, that are very permanent and affect the state of the next film. So in saying, oh, of course they're not going to kill off Spock, well, yeah, they're not going to not bring him back, but you're saying, oh, this film is so predictable. Well, actually, they've done a lot of things so far that are not very predictable. Like, they just aren't. So I would make the argument that this is not really a valid point on either of the arguments.
Is okay. Spock is walking upright. Does no one on Vulcan stop to think about the fact that they just pulled off the Faltor Pan, which was just a legend before tonight? You assholes believe in ceremonies and a bunch of bullshit, so it's hard to believe you wouldn't step back and go, God damn, that was remarkable.
Okay. I just want to make sure I've got this right. A few minutes ago, Jeremy sinned the Vulcans for not being logical enough. Now, he is sinning them for not being illogical and just kind of pumping their air in the fist and just going, yeah, well done us. You can have one, you can't have the other. You can have one or the other. You can't have both, right? Like, very sorry, but that's not how that works.
Why would you do this? Because the needs of the one outweighed the needs of the many.
Kirk flipped the script on you, Spock. Damn. Wait a minute. That still doesn't make any sense.
It does. So, basically, Kirk is just saying, your needs outweigh our needs. And, for Spock, who was dead at the time, I'd say that's pretty apt. Spock was in some pretty desperate need to not be dead. But, that basically... I mean, firstly, the original line, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, that works fine as long as you have the context of, so the few can choose to sacrifice themselves for the needs of the many, as opposed to the few being forced to make sacrifices by the many. Because otherwise you start running into these very questionable stances. But yeah, right now, this makes total sense, right? Like, they all go back for Spock. It's a very big moment for the film, and like this line, it makes total sense.
I can't help but think this whole thing could have been avoided if they'd just brought Spock back to his home planet in the first place. Sure, he wouldn't have gotten that sweet regenesis to magically come back to life, but we could have avoided this movie at least. Bring on the way.
Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna say this right now. And I'm going to say it once, okay? So, the Enterprise, to my knowledge, does not have a morgue. It is naval tradition that if you don't have the facilities to do so, you should have a burial at sea. The reason for this is because having a rotting corpse is not particularly good for hygiene, and it also really is tremendously bad for morale, right? I mean, people don't want to buy houses if they know someone has died in the house. Imagine serving on a ship knowing that, oh, sickbay is a deck or two below me, that's where Spock's corpse is. It's unsettling, right? It's a little bit less unsettling at a grave, but there is a reason why we have graves in one particular place and we don't have them just in everyone's back garden, right? There's a reason for that. So, yeah, the reality is if you don't have a morgue and you don't have a means of transporting corpses, you need to bury them at sea. So that's the reason why this happens. And then he goes on about, oh yeah, well, if that happened, we wouldn't have a Spock returns to life plotline. We would have. Guaranteed, we would have had that plotline. It would have been different, but it would have still existed because that plot line, it's not a matter of, okay, we did the film, but now we're in a state where we need to bring Spock back because this is the most, this makes the most narrative sense, so we need to throw even more money at Leonard Nimoy to get him to come back and play Spock. No, Leonard Nimoy said, I want to continue playing Spock, and then they fit the narrative around that. So if they didn't do the Genesis planet rejuvenating Spock, they would have done some of the plot line potentially involving time travel. I don't know, but they would have done something else, right? So it's not like, oh, this is the narrative that led into Spock coming back. That's not the case.
Whales.
Dory.
Oh, okay. Right. Another thing. So the first one they did, the first one of these sentences for the Cinema Sins video, was a joke about was it Stephen Collins, Colin Stevenson, Colin Steven? I can't remember his name, but basically the fact that he's a paedophile, right? So that was their first sentence. That was the joke. Play date with Colin Stephen Collins. Second one was SETI Alpha 5, and that was a full sentence that they did with Khan, his whole monologue. I won't pretend to understand it. Here, they're doing the Finding Nemo thing with whales. Alright. In the film that doesn't have whales. Like, at least in the other two, it was, like, genuinely, at least in the other two, the previous two, they were related to the film itself, even if they weren't particularly funny or good. This is just not even this film, it's the wrong film. The whale one is the fourth one. Why are you talking about whale shit here? Sorry, it's just...
What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you sure you speak whale?
Can you... How long does this... Okay. This doesn't go on for too long.
I'll get you next time, Gadget.
I like this reference. This is quite good. I like it. This is amusing. A smirk appeared on my face.
Next time.
This is the Nebuchadnezzar on approach, requesting access through Gate 3.
Nebuchadnezzar, this is Zion Control. Maintain present velocity and stand by.
Okay, you switched out the voices, you switched out the dialogue. This one's not particularly funny. Is it a bit clever? Not really, no. You just took one docking scene from one film and replaced it with the visuals of another docking scene from another film. I don't really see the cleverness in that. Okay, that was good. That was peak. That genuinely playing Darth Sidious's theme with the lighting and the way he enters, perfect. I love that. That is okay. I might even clip that and send it to people. That is genuinely funny. Okay. I love it. Perfect.
No, Jim. The Enterprise would never stand the pounding.
Phrasing?
Yeah, alright. That's what she said style joke. Alright. Old but gold, I suppose. A bit dated even for 8 years ago. But fair enough. Alright, yeah. Cantina, sure. You got a bar in a sci-fi setting, sure. You got some aliens. Alright. Fair enough, I guess.
No one would have believed in the early years of the 21st century that our world was being watched by intelligences greater than our own.
What? Is that The Matrix again, or is that another film? I'm trying to remember. I don't know what film that is, but yeah, I don't really... you got the visuals of the planet there, but I don't see the actual parallels that make the joke funny, to be honest.
Yeah, but this time I've got the money.
Okay, you've already done the Star Wars Cantina joke, but I guess you could do it again.
Side elevator. Agents on their way up.
Retreat to your exits. Agents are coming.
Yeah, he certainly said agents. Definitely cue the Matrix voice lines referring to agents. Okay, sorry. Some of these are clever, some of these are funny, some of those are neither.
Things have certainly changed around here. I remember when this was all farmland as far as the eye could see. Old man Peabody owned all.
Yeah, I've not seen the thing that this is in reference to, but is This isn't Back to the Future, is it, that he's referencing? Can't remember. I can't quote Back to the Future line for line, so if this is a line from Back to the Future, I probably wouldn't recognize it unless it's one of the more notable ones. But yeah, all right. I guess this is Christopher Lloyd in I don't know, in the wilderness. So why not use this? I guess that's the only connection.
Of this.
Enough of you!
Is that the RoboCop thing where the guy falls? Maybe? I don't know. Again, I think this relies on people knowing specific moments of specific films that maybe not everyone will know. Right, okay, that's that. That's okay. We'll do Star Trek 4 next time, but we'll also do some comments. Yeah, this alright, Destruction Code 000. Hey, that's the same combination I use on my luggage. Spaceballs reference. Very nice. That would have been funny. Why avoid this movie? It is one of the most underrated Trek movies. Nimoy did a magnificent job directing. It wasn't my impression that anyone did avoid this movie, or that the video at least suggested that people avoided this movie. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what he's referring to there. Yeah, okay. This guy thinks Klingon bastard, you killed my son was more iconic than Khan. Fair dues. I mean, you're not wrong. That is a very iconic line, but I think Khan just became a meme, to be honest, and that's why people know it. It's not because one is more profound than the other. I think it's just one that got memed harder than the other. A son is a son. Duration of knowing them first is hardly the primary factor in the feelings involved. He's known he's had a son since he was born. He just stayed away, and now he's just getting to know him, and he's been killed. The reaction is pretty spot on. Yeah, absolutely. You know, you don't really need to have like a very strong connection or prior history with someone to be sad that they're gone. You know, I feel bad about people who I don't particularly know very well who die. Just I remember my neighbor died. We'd only recently moved in, but it was still a very sad moment. And again, I had absolutely no relation to the neighbor, so I can only imagine. Yeah, finding out your son died, pretty brutal. Especially if he died because he was being held hostage to, you know, call you on your bluff. So I imagine there's some level of responsibility there as well. Yeah, another joke. You sinned Scotty's velvet, but I think Chekhov's little Dutch boy outfit is at least equally sin-worthy. Yeah, I think you're right. Genuinely, I do. You see camera assistant's hand stop the stunt double from hitting the lens. Let's take a look.
Struck sequence allows for the cinematically.
Oh, yep. There you go. That was a good spot, actually.
I, for one, am glad that the Enterprise's self-destruct sequence allows for the.
There it is. There's the hand. Yeah. Fair dues. That's a good spot. Right. Yeah, sonic screwdriver joke. Cool. Yeah, a mock time reference. Cool. Let's take a look. Anything else that is worth noting? This is quite a nice joke. If my calculations are correct, when this baby hits warp 8.8, you're going to see some serious shit. This is because they use the same bird of prey to time travel. That's pretty cool. Ship is not easily run with 6 people. It's actually a ball lake and it fails quite spectacularly. Cool, that's a good point to raise. Had me until since 90. He had him for quite a while actually. Sin 90 is very late. Kirk had simply heard Cruge use the same phrase a few minutes earlier and hoped that repeating it, he and Spock would be transported up. Well done. Well noticed. Bring the whales, damn it. All right. Erroneous sin when Scotty keeps part of the Excelsior to show Bones. That is exactly what a guy like Scotty does. This is speaking as a guy that builds life-saving robots for a living and does what Scotty did with alarming frequency. Cool. Yeah, I'm guessing as part of his job, then he'd need to test that those robots work, and he did so by seeing if they could work, if they survive a little bash here and there, or have some parts removed. I don't know, taking a guess, but still, interesting insight from 8 years ago. Sin 78, the reason the codes were still valid is because the Enterprise had not gone through a formal decommissioning and was most likely stored. Also, Scotty was on board for some time, so before they legged it, so he could have restored computer control. Absolutely true. I think control was never rescinded, but fair enough. Yeah, Doc Brown, fair enough. Yeah, joke about the Vulcan robes having the Legend of Zelda Triforce triangles on them. That is a fair
Spock
enough
is walking
joke.
upright.
Yeah, Legend of Zelda Triforce triangles. He is correct. So that's fair dues. Yeah, it's underrated, basically, this comment is saying. Yep, still waiting on the space whales. Yeah, I'm kind of gonna call it here. There are a few comments here that are, genuinely calling Jeremy out and just saying, yeah, you're not really correct here. Um, yeah, some of them pointing out some missed sins. Some of them just kind of saying we enjoyed the jokes. I'll be honest with you, for a sins video, this had a lot of valid points and a lot of points, or at least jokes, which were kind of all right. Like maybe you aren't laugh out loud funny, except for the Sith one, but otherwise were kind of okay-ish. Um, but yeah, I would kind of just go into the general sentiment of, well, if Jeremy shortened this video from 13 minutes to 5 or 6, this would have been much better, right? Because we'd have genuine sins. But alternatively, if he had a counter here that just went over the trivia, because there's so many bits of trivia and so many bits of questions he could ask, and so many things that aren't sins. They aren't things that the film does wrong, but they are just things that Jeremy points out. Insights. An insight counter. Like I would be happy with that because my main problem is, uh, my main problem is the sins are counted as the same as valid criticism, and sometimes he will just make shitty jokes. Sometimes he'll ask rhetorical questions. Sometimes he'll ask things that just aren't even relevant at all. Sometimes he'll just make a really bad sex joke. Then I'll have to make fun of the size of Jeremy's penis. It's just an ongoing thing. But the reality is, like, if there was a separate counter here for genuine criticisms and other comments, I wouldn't have a problem, right? Or at least I wouldn't have as big of a problem as I have at the moment with CinemaSins. Because I don't think it's unfair to say that CinemaSins does have a problem with the validity of what it is they're actually saying. Because if you're going to deliver false and true statements with the same cadence, in the same presentation, in the same style, and then people pick up on the fact that actually there's a discrepancy here, and there's very little to go on as to whether you're joking or being serious. I feel like that's a valid criticism of the format that's been chosen. And I also feel like a lot of goodwill is kind of dissipated from CinemaSins. So these days, they're not pulling in the viewing numbers that they used to, and we can't see the dislikes, but I imagine the dislikes are not particularly good. I mean, here we have, we have a surprisingly good like to dislike ratio, but oh, sorry, a like to view ratio even, sort of. Um, so I mean, it's not quite 1 in 10. It is, I think, 2 in 100. So that's 1 in 50. I think off the top of my head. Let's do some maths very quickly. Let's do some maths, right? So we have 17,000 divided by 1 million times by 100. So that's 1.7% of views. So we have 1.7%. So if we have, 0.017 times by 1 million, and then we would just get 17,000, wouldn't we? Yeah. Okay, ratios, maths. Give me a second here, hang on. Yeah, there we go. I think that's right. So about 58.82-ish. I think, I'm not sure, but I want to say, yeah, if you divide that through, that should be the right answer. Anyway, some maths person will correct me. Anyway, next video next week will be the voyage home. As always, I am, I don't own these films, so I am having to buy them each time to go through. So that it's about $5.99 that I'm paying per film. So if anyone does know a cheaper way of watching these films legally, let me know. But also, if anyone does want to donate any cash, it would be nice to recover the $5.99 a week to make these. I will also look at again, I'll look at other content. So I'm obviously doing my Helldivers stuff, but also I'm going to look at making some videos going over the latest Star Trek series and going over why they are bad, basically, why certain elements are just really insufferable. Part of that might be forcing myself to watch through Star Trek Picard as well. I watched through 2 episodes and I couldn't stomach any more, but yeah, I feel like if I'm not watching it for my enjoyment, for my entertainment, but instead I'm watching it to actually criticize the directions which are being taken, and to actually delve a bit further into how and why, and define quantifiably why these are bad, because I feel like we all know they are, but it's just actually conjuring up the irrefutable evidence that no, this is definitely a drop in quality. I'm not going insane. I feel like that would be very nice to have, just in everyone's back, in everyone's back pocket, in the back of everyone's mind. But yeah, I mean, obviously you have Star Trek Discovery as well. I was thinking about also doing a series where I go over the problems in that series, but I do so in a way where I'm not doing it as a Trekkie, right? I'm not doing it as someone who is really involved in Star Trek. So I'm doing it as someone who has just seen this one particular series, and so I'm kind of pointing out internal inconsistencies, because Alex Kurtzman, we've all seen the clip where he says, there's 60 years of Star Trek material. It's impossible to get it right. It's literally impossible to get the continuity right. Well, okay, there are 4 seasons of Discovery or something like that. Let's see how consistent it is internally, with its own internal, logic, with its own internal events. So that's something that I want to do, because what I have noticed is there are a lot of internal inconsistencies which just are not actually relevant to being a Trekkie at all. It's just relevant to making a film and making it good and making it not suck. So that's something that I do want to follow up with. But again, that's going to take time. Last week I did a couple of videos and a Helldivers video as well, and then I did a Helldivers video through the week. I am probably going to calm down a little bit, and I'm going to try and do one Sins video here, one Debunked video, and one Helldivers video, or one gameplay video where I'm not talking. Because as much as I love the sound of my own voice, I actually don't. I rather hate it. But I do need to not talk in some of these videos. Although, fun fact, with the exception of this video here, but I will start recording videos first thing in the morning on a Saturday, because I think the way my voice sounds as soon as I wake up is much better than how my voice sounds now, you know. So that's a fun little bit of trivia. So if you do notice that my voice changes over the time of these videos, that's why. There is an acting trick that what's his face? Oh man, what is his name? I've forgotten his name. I can't believe I forgot his name. Let me find his name. Morgan Freeman, that's it. Can't believe I forgot the name of Morgan Freeman, but basically he does a series of throat exercises that relaxes his throat, and apparently that's the reason why your voice sounds deeper in the morning, is because, well, you've freshly woken up, all of your muscles are relaxed, which is also why you're slightly taller in the morning as well. Not by much, not by anything noticeable, but you are slightly taller. In fact, that reminds me of my idea for a D&D campaign. My character, I played D&D like once, and it was a homebrew game that was like just we didn't understand the rules. We were just memeing around. But I had the idea for a character because some of these guys were like, "Oh yeah, I have the soul of a dragon, but not just any dragon. It was a black dragon," and it's like, I don't know, some other stuff, and some other people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm the son of a known sorcerer," and I'm just like, right, well, I have, I'm someone who carries a very dark secret with him. He has a magical ability that at night he transforms completely, so that he is about half an inch taller at night, and he's back to normal during the day. No one notices, but at the night, sometimes people ask him, "Are you a bit taller than I imagined?" And he says, "No, no, I'm always this height." But he knows deep down what has happened. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking about random stuff now because I'm just kind of trying to avoid actually signing off because I have no idea how to end these videos. At some point, I'll figure out how to do it. Maybe I'll even have like a little outro video that makes sense and is cool, or even some music, as opposed to just talking into the ether. But my logic is, well, you all listen to your own music that you enjoy, so you might as well listen to that while you listen to this. I can play my music over my stuff, but you're probably playing your music as well, so why should we both play our music? And if you're watching this on a mobile and you can't play your music over this video, don't watch it on mobile, watch it on PC. You can get all sorts of stuff on PC, including ways that make the video more enjoyable to watch. I can't name those ways because then the video will get taken down, but yeah, there are definitely ways to make YouTube, let's say, a little bit more enjoyable to watch. Anyway, on that note, I will end the video. I will be back next week with Star Trek 4, or I will also do another video on Star Trek 3. I'll take a look and see if there's any like Trek culture-esque things going on, and we'll go from there. All right, I will, yeah, for the fourth time now, I will sign off.